Tonight on Inside Story, fatal obsession.
This is, without doubt, one of the most bizarre homicides that I have worked on.
The girl next door. Her jealous neighbour.
Craze obsession.
The bizarre teenage fantasy
unheard of.
that turned deadly.
I've just been murdered.
And a dark secret
He knows what he did that night,
he'd do anything to protect.
and he knows where she is.
Even murder.
I lost my temper and I just went straight for the throat.
He's not insane, he's very cunning. He's evil.
Hello, I'm Layla McKinnon. Welcome to Inside Story. Love, jealousy, envy, they can drive people to do crazy things, even commit murder. Tonight, a chilling insight into what can happen when these powerful human emotions become an all-consuming obsession. A troubled teenager totally infatuated with her young neighbour. A naive woman hopelessly in love with a cruel and controlling married man. Both had lost all sense of reason, and as Brett McLeod discovered, their obsession would have deadly consequences.
Yes, Layla, we've got the stories of two very different young women, one whose fixation would lead to her becoming a murderer, the other one whose fixation would lead to her becoming a victim.
Yes, Brett, for both it would become a fatal obsession.
He was the arrogant, controlling lover.
He's evil.
I wish I had it let go, but I didn't.
Yeah. He's not insane, he's very cunning, but evil.
She was the shy, disturbed neighbour.
It was trouble.
Both had a deadly obsession.
They know fully well what they're doing, that they shouldn't be doing it, but they still do it for whatever reason. So they're not mad, they're just bad.
In the leafy suburbs of Melbourne, Caroline Reed Robertson was consumed by a crazy obsession with her neighbour, pretty, popular dance student Rachel Barber.
Hello, Rachel.
But she didn't want to be like Rachel Barber, she wanted to become Rachel Barber.
Rachel wasn't perfect, but Caroline thought she was. And she wanted to become Rachel and and become part of Rachel and take her place in our family.
As we'll see tonight, Caroline Reed Robertson's crazy obsession would lead inexorably to murder. Because in order to become Rachel Barber, she first had to kill her.
This is, without doubt, one of the most bizarre homicides that I'm aware of or have worked on. It is skin-crawling, chillingly cold, calculated murder.
For 5 years, Caroline Reed Robertson waited and secretly plotted. And one day, Rachel Barber simply didn't come home.
I was panicking. And you think, why panic? She's 15, but I felt really uneasy. I felt really, really uneasy.
In Sydney, a torrid, ill-fated affair that ends in tragedy and an enduring mystery. This is a lurid story of adultery, arson, and finally, murder.
I was numb. I just at first I didn't want to hear what they were saying.
It started with a chance meeting at a Sydney hospital. Kylie Bouchardier was a nurse. Paul Wilkinson, a liaison officer with the New South Wales Police Force. They'd met before, but this time, something clicked.
It's very manipulative. Very, very manipulative. She was looking for something and thought that she found it.
Soon, Kylie and Paul were in the throes of a wildly passionate affair. And it mattered little that they were both married or that Paul had a tiny baby. And they weren't involved in their sordid sexual trysts. They were madly phoning and texting each other in just 4 months, 23,836 times. Yet incredibly, they managed to hide their dirty little secret. That'd be one secret you probably wish Kylie hadn't kept.
Exactly.
But as we'll discover tonight, when Kylie became pregnant and their secret was about to be exposed, things changed dramatically. And she was scared?
Very scared. Very, very scared.
But first, Melbourne, and the chilling story of Caroline Reed Robertson, the twisted 19-year-old who found the perfect victim in Rachel Barber, the pretty girl down the road.
Happy Christmas, Rachel. I was shocked but not surprised, really, in any way. Caroline had this crazy obsession.
So you'd felt she was capable of doing that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. She was a very peculiar character.
Caroline Reed Robertson and Rachel Barber both lived in this street in Mont Albert, a comfortable middle-class suburb of Melbourne. But that's where the similarities ended.
I can't stand you!
Her parents were heading for a breakup. Caroline's home life was deeply unhappy. She was shy, reclusive, moody. How would you have described her then?
On the face of it, Caroline was fine. She had a quiet personality, but what happens inside a house is often not seen outside of the house.
Rachel Barber was the exact opposite. 4 years younger than Caroline, her home was full of love and joy. And she was happy, outgoing, athletic. Ballet was her life.
Ballet was always her first passion, and Rachel would come home at the end of the day and our whole house would be dismantled, and I just accepted that. And she'd get all her dress-ups out and she would just improvise, and there would be full-on performances.
Although they lived just 100 metres apart, Rachel and Caroline had little to do with each other. But when Rachel was 10, Caroline came over to babysit. And even then, she was already fascinated by her young neighbour. She clearly saw Rachel as the ideal person, as the person she wanted.
Yeah, and this is the whole silly thing, because if Rachel had been told that Caroline saw her as the perfect person, Rachel would have laughed about that herself, because nobody's perfect and Rachel wasn't perfect.
Over the next 5 years, this fascination with Rachel festered inside the troubled Caroline Reed Robertson. As we'll see, it was soon to become a fatal obsession.
I think that Caroline was very unhappy with herself. She didn't like the way she looked. She did want to take on that persona of someone that was happy, that was beautiful, that was popular, like Rachel was, and try and live that life. You and I can sit here and say, well, that's just not possible, but certainly that's what she wanted to do, and that is absolutely my belief of why she took Rachel's life.
Coming up on Inside Story, from teenage fantasy
So we were oblivious to anything that Caroline could have been planning.
to fatal obsession.
One of the homicide detectives said that he really honestly believed Rachel's days were numbered.
Caroline's crazy plan to become Rachel Barber.
Caroline Reed Robertson was a very unhappy teenager. Her house was a war zone. Her parents' marriage was over. She was in constant conflict with her mother and 2 sisters. Life couldn't be any more different to that of her neighbour, pretty, popular Rachel Barber.
Anyway, I've got to go now. Sorry, goodbye. Yay!
Here we were, mum and dad and 3 daughters, happy. And then across the road, she has 3 sisters, mum and dad, dad's left home, family unhappy. So from that regard, she might well have wanted to wish that she could have something like what we had.
They're well suited, actually.
She certainly did. Caroline Reed Robertson yearned for the happiness and security of Rachel Barber's life. It all seemed so perfect. She wanted to be just like Rachel Barber. She wanted to be Rachel Barber.
I'm going to put my makeup on today.
Some people might change their behaviour, their appearance, their job, their lifestyles, so they can be like their role model. But to actually want to kill the role model and replace them, I mean, that's going really a long way.
Caroline's behaviour became more and more extreme. She was full of self-loathing and anger.
I don't fit anywhere in this crazy world because I am ugly.
In desperation, her mother Gail shared her fears with Rachel's mum, Elizabeth.
I had Gail crying on my shoulder. My clothes were saturated with Gail's tears for her grief over worry for her daughter. And she said, I can't do anything. And I'd say, take her to see somebody. And she said, I've tried that. She doesn't want to go.
Instead, Caroline retreated into her own world, writing tortured letters to her father David, who'd since moved out of home.
Obese pizza face, white worm, massive nose, and just plain weird. I feel like a tortured, troubled soul. Signed, Spotty Dotty.
Well, sometimes you start off with a process of fantasising, and then, that compulsion becomes stronger and stronger. And then if you don't start acting on it, then you just feel this terrible discomfort. And that's what motivates people to do things that they shouldn't be doing.
When Rachel was 14, the Barbers moved to the outer Melbourne suburb of Heathmont. The family thought they'd seen the last of their strange neighbour. But they were wrong. Caroline continued to stalk Rachel, recording every moment, every feeling in her diary.
Rachel is strikingly attractive. Dancer's body, very clear, pale skin, hypnotic green eyes, wild, free spirit, passionate, charming, moody, mysterious.
We were living our lives, they were living theirs. So we were oblivious to anything that Caroline could have been planning. Rachel would have been spied on quite a few times because she was keeping an eye on Rachel a lot.
How do you feel about the fact that she was planning this for so long?
That's scary. I mean, that's scary that, she had photos of all of us girls all over her walls. I mean, that's crazy.
It's hard to know exactly when Caroline Reid Robertson decided to murder Rachel Barber. Certainly by the time she left school, planning had begun in earnest. She gathered enough information to assume Rachel's identity, including her birth certificate, and she'd rented this one-bedroom apartment in Paran. Now all she had to do was to lure Rachel here.
She was thinking about this for a couple of years, or even if she wasn't thinking about it, it was in her subconscious. One of the homicide detectives sadly said that he really honestly believed Rachel's days were numbered.
With people who lack conscience, they will see the victim as someone who, by their own fault, is in the wrong place at the wrong time and deserve what they get. If you're that naive and you fall for my trap, then that's your fault. This is the kind of logic that I've heard over and over.
In early 1999, Caroline contacted Rachel out of the blue and told her about a modelling job that could earn her some much-needed money. But Rachel's mum intervened, telling her she was too young. A few months later, Caroline tried again, only this time she told Rachel not to tell anybody.
Your mum will be fine with it when she finds out that you've got $100.
I said, "You're up to something." I said, "What are you up to?" And it was almost there. And she said nothing. And she waited for her father, and then she was fine, and then they went off and she waved goodbye. She said, "I love you" at the end, and that was the morning.
It was the last time Elizabeth would see her daughter alive. That afternoon, Caroline met Rachel after her dance class. They caught the tram from Richmond to here in Paran, just 100 metres down the road from Caroline's unit. It was 6:40 p.m. Back at her unit, Caroline put Rachel at ease. She showed her some relaxation exercises. Then she attacked, choking Rachel with a computer cable.
Rachel pleaded for her life, and I think to myself, the last person she saw in this life was Caroline. And Rachel would not have been able to understand why Caroline would be murdering her. I think she would be there would be no logic. There's no logic in this death.
That evening, when Rachel failed to meet her father Michael for a lift home, her family immediately feared the worst.
When Michael rang me up and said Rachel wasn't at the tram stop, I was panicking. And you think, why? Why panic? She's 15, but we knew something was wrong because she wasn't home.
When did you start to feel something was wrong?
I knew instantly. I knew, because I just had that gut feeling because it wasn't Rachel. Rachel wasn't someone to just disappear. There's no way that she'd want to run away or anything like that. It just wasn't her. So my instinct was she was dead that night.
Coming up, Caroline's chilling confession.
I asked her where Rachel was, and she responded to me that Rachel was dead.
But was she mad or was she evil?
Rachel Barber is missing, and with each passing minute, her family's fears for her safety grow.
She's gone somewhere that she thought was legit. That's my gut feeling.
We want Rachel back. She's missed. We love her.
I felt really uneasy. I felt really, really uneasy. It was very unusual for her to do this.
Within hours, Rachel's parents, Elizabeth and Michael, organised a huge search near her dad's school in the inner Melbourne suburb of Richmond. Over the next few days, they were unrelenting, phoning friends and workmates, handing out flyers and plastering the streets with posters. But the household in those, in the first few days...
Very crazy. Didn't see Mum and Dad much at all because they were always out on the road, in the city, putting up posters.
We knew something was wrong. The police kept trying to tell us that she'd just gone off with a friend, but we knew Rachel wouldn't worry us like that.
We have grave concerns for her welfare at this point in time.
Rachel's disappearance was now big news.
She's a kid that will not go with anyone she doesn't trust.
And soon, police had a breakthrough. A witness had seen her and another girl getting off the tram in Paran. How important was that piece of information?
Really critical information. And the girl who had this sighting was someone that knew Rachel, that had been to the same school as Rachel.
With a reliable sighting, police now set about finding a link with Paran, and they soon discovered it. The night before she disappeared, Rachel took 2 calls from a Paran phone number. It was Caroline Reed Robertson's number.
Anyone, okay?
At that point, very cruelly so, Michael actually believed that she was alive. And he thought for whatever reason Rachel was with Caroline, but the important thing would be that she would be alive, that she hadn't been kidnapped, that she hadn't been raped. All the dreadful things that you could possibly ever imagine happened to your daughter, we had visualised.
When police visited Caroline's unit, there was no answer. Inside, they found her semi-conscious on the floor. Somehow, their arrival had triggered an epileptic fit. But there was no sign of Rachel.
Caroline, can you hear me?
Caroline Reed Robertson was brought here to the Alfred Hospital. A few hours later, police were able to speak to her. What she told them in an unemotional, almost matter-of-fact way, shocked them to the core.
I asked her where Rachel was, and she responded to me that Rachel was dead. And that surprised me. And I said, are you sure she's dead? And she said, yes, I've buried her. And I said, listen, are you sure? Are you sure that she's dead? Is there no way we can help her? And she told me that she'd buried Rachel on a family country property near where she'd buried other pets.
So she confessed straight away?
Yes.
Police soon found Rachel's clothing at Caroline's unit. Photos of her adorned the walls, and there were signs that her body may have been kept there for several days. Even more damning, they discovered Caroline's incredibly detailed plan to murder Rachel and steal her identity.
There is evidence of planning. Caroline clearly planned this out. This was a premeditated murder.
This wasn't a crime of passion, this wasn't spur of the moment.
Well, it's not spur of the moment, and it's certainly not passion.
The next morning, detectives searched Caroline's family farm at Kilmore, 70 kilometres northeast of Melbourne. Here they discovered Rachel's badly decomposed remains in a shallow grave, just where Caroline told them she'd be. You've gone from missing person to murder.
Yes, absolutely.
Neil sat in front of us and he said, there's no other way of saying this. Rachel's been murdered. And we thought, Rachel's been murdered? We're all very calm. And I kept thinking, why couldn't Rachel have done something? Why couldn't she have thrown a chair through a window? Couldn't she have done something?
Do you remember the night when it was confirmed that Rachel was dead?
Absolutely. I can't forget that night at all. I did ask them who did it, and they told me it was Caroline. I was shocked but not surprised, really, in any way.
From here on, police struggled to get any more information out of Caroline. She was vague, unresponsive, evasive.
Caroline's very cold, very matter of fact, but just very cold. There's no emotion there whatsoever.
Calculating?
Absolutely. Calculating. It's unbelievable that she would not recall what had occurred or know that she was involved in the murder of Rachel.
Despite Caroline's almost total lack of recall, the case against her was overwhelming. There was her meticulous murder plan, her obsessive diary entries about Rachel, the fact that Rachel was strangled with a computer cord from Caroline's work. What's more, Rachel's remains were buried on Caroline's family farm. And then, of course, there was her confession.
She's dead.
On March 13, 1999, Caroline Reed Robertson was charged with Rachel Barber's murder.
Unheard of for someone a teenager to kill a younger person to steal their identity. It's basically unheard of.
I've never come across another one of those. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but they are so rare out there. Very strange.
Caroline Reed Robertson's court appearance was a deeply emotional experience for Rachel's family.
I have seen a photo of that noose. I know it could have been let go right at the very end when she said Rachel was pleading, please, please don't.
Bizarrely, after confessing to police, Caroline decided to fight the murder charge. But then, at the 11th hour, she pleaded guilty, denying Rachel's loved ones a trial and the answers they so desperately wanted.
And I wanted her to get up close to me because I know I've got my daughter's eyes. And she would have seen Rachel's eyes in me and maybe she would have remembered what she did.
Caroline Reed Robertson was sentenced to 20 years jail with a 14.5-year minimum. In his sentencing, Justice Frank Vincent said this was a difficult task because everyone had lost. But ultimately, no one had lost as much as Rachel Barber, from whom he said Caroline Reed Robertson took everything. What was that like?
I saw her hands. All I could do was look at her hands.
Why?
Because those hands murdered Rachel. And that's all I could think about were the hands.
Hello, Rachel. Doesn't she look elegant?
It's now 15 years since Rachel Barber was murdered. The terrible thoughts of her final moments never really fade. But there are so many more happy memories, and that's what her mum tries to remember.
When Rachel was murdered, her life couldn't have been better. And she was at a point where she totally believed in herself, that she was doing her dancing and everything was going to be right for her.
I've got to go now. Sorry, goodbye, goodbye.
Still to come on Inside Story, lured to her death by the man she loved.
Can you think of anywhere she might have gone? I don't know.
But what was the secret that sealed her fate?
Kylie's behaviour changed dramatically.
Something clicked the day Kylie Labouchardierre met Paul Wilkinson. The attraction was instant and mutual, and soon the pair was involved in an intense affair. Both were married, but they didn't care. They were besotted with each other, addicted. However, Paul Wilkinson wasn't the charming man Kylie fell in love with, not at all.
These are the last haunting images of Kylie Labouchardierre. What really happened to her, only one person knows, Paul James Wilkinson. And he's not telling anyone.
Well, can you think of anywhere she might have gone? I don't know.
Very, very manipulative. pathological liar. Quite incredible, the stories that he actually had made up.
It's 10 years since Kylie Labouchardie was murdered. Her body never to be found. In life, she was outgoing, vibrant, happy.
Is that a good-looking woman?
I aim to have it all.
Oh, yeah, and the bride.
She was beautiful, she was generous, she was very kind-hearted, very loving, very caring person. When she went into nursing, that's what she did, she cared for people. She just loved life.
It was through nursing that Kylie fell for the charming, persistent Paul Wilkinson.
Julie says she's never seen a deer like this before.
Paul was a patient at Sutherland Hospital, where Kylie worked.
They'd met before, but this time something clicked, and they started an intense affair. It mattered little that both were newly married. Well, Paul's wife, Julie, had a baby on the way. At the time, did you think there was something else going on?
Not really, because I was so consumed with, one, the pregnancy not going the way I thought it would, and then trying to work out being a first-time mother.
What about him? Was he at home all the time, or was he going out?
He was going out a lot. He would tell me he was going fishing and things like that. Who knows? In retrospect, I don't know.
When they weren't engaged in steamy sexual trysts, Kylie and Paul were endlessly texting and phoning each other. In 4 months, they made contact a staggering 23,836 times. That's more than once every 10 minutes, every hour of every day.
The texts, the sheer volume of texts between Wilkinson and Kylie was pretty extraordinary, wasn't it?
That's incredible. Yeah, I'm not much of a texter myself, but yeah, they were almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Despite the incessant phone calls and texts, Kylie's husband Sean was also oblivious to the affair. Like Paul and Julie Wilkinson, they'd only been married for a year, but already the relationship was all but over.
Kylie's behaviour changed dramatically, absolutely dramatically. Kylie announced to the family that Sean and her were getting a divorce, and their family naturally were very much shell-shocked, couldn't believe that this was actually happening.
Did she say why?
She didn't really give a reason why, and at that point in time, the family had no knowledge of Paul Wilkinson.
Wilkinson's marriage was also doomed. There were tensions in the household. He was constantly on sick leave from the police force, where he worked as an Aboriginal community liaison officer. Wilkinson was eventually sacked because of his appalling work record. And it didn't help, he was a chronic gambler, a fantasist, and a controlling bully.
Can you give an example what sort of things he'd do?
I wouldn't be allowed to wear anything low cut. Could have no male friends, only had a couple of female friends that he approved of. So yeah, it was very isolating.
Did he ever get aggressive?
Yeah.
Physically violent?
Physically violent, threatening. He'd threatened to kill me, he'd threatened to strangle me, yeah.
Over what sort?
And I think it did get worse, probably in that time period after our son was born.
And it was when their son was born that things really got weird in the Wilkinson household. To continue his affair, Paul Wilkinson needed an empty nest. And so he concocted an extraordinary story to convince his wife to move out, saying that his police work had put them in danger.
Paul then said we got death threats. It was apparently to do with a case, and he said it'd be safer if I stayed at Mum and Dad's. So my son and I went straight from the hospital to my parents' house.
Didn't even get to go home?
Nope. No.
Did you have suspicions then?
No. No.
Did you see the death threats?
Yep.
What did they say?
There was one that I remember vividly. It was my son's teddy bear stuck to the wall with a knife through it with a handwritten note, "Bye-bye, baby."
By early 2004, something had to give. Paul Wilkinson was busy juggling a wife, a new baby, and a secret lover. Then, in April, came the bombshell. Kylie was pregnant. Did she like to confide in you? Did you feel you were a trusted friend as well as a mum?
No, Kylie didn't confide in anybody. She was her own person. She was very, very secretive.
Looking back, that'd be one secret you probably wish Kylie hadn't kept.
Exactly.
But Kylie did tell one person, Paul Wilkinson.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Little could she know that this joyous announcement would seal her fate. You didn't know she was pregnant?
We didn't know what was going on. We hadn't met this person. We didn't know the control that he had over Kylie at that point of time. Yeah, no idea.
While Kylie was looking forward to a new life with Paul Wilkinson, he had other ideas. Nevertheless, he agreed to leave his wife and move with Kylie to Dubbo in central New South Wales. Well, at least that's what he told her.
Do you think he ever actually planned to start a new life with Kylie?
I don't think so, no.
He was just stringing her along?
It looks that way. We didn't have any evidence to support that.
2 days before her murder, Kylie excitedly made arrangements for removalists to transport her furniture to Dubbo. Then she sent this text to Paul Wilkinson.
Today, and then Wednesday, and then it's Dubbo. You and I together forever.
Did she tell you she was planning on going to Dubbo?
No.
She really just up and left?
Yes. We had no idea that that's what she was planning to do.
Instead, the secretive Kylie told her family she was going to the country to spend a few days with friends. On the 28th of April 2004, Kylie set off to meet Paul Wilkinson for the drive to Dubbo. With her, she had $25,000 in cash, but she still stopped off here at the local ATM to withdraw even more money. It is the very last image of Kylie Labouchardiere.
When Kylie arrived here at Sydney's Central Railway Station, this is something she'd been planning for months. She'd been excitedly texting and phoning Paul all the way here. The furniture was already on its way to Dubbo. She just had to change trains, and then it was a short ride to Sutherland, where she and Paul would begin their new life together. She had no idea what was coming next. She thought she was starting a new life?
Yep.
He planned to end her life?
Yeah, it would appear that's what happened on the night.
Disbelief. I was numb. I just at first I didn't want to hear or didn't want to hear what they were saying. It was very, very hard. Very, very hard.
Next, the confession.
I lost my temper and I just went straight for the throat.
And a cruel game of cat and mouse.
How would you describe what he was doing with these false searches?
Very cruel. Very, very cruel.
Kylie Labouchardiere thought she was starting a new life with her lover, Paul Wilkinson. But just hours after these images of her were recorded, she was dead. It would be weeks before her terrible fate was revealed.
Alarm bells rang within me. Alarm bells started ringing. We kept on ringing her mobile phone and like there was no answer. And this was totally out of character for Kylie to be gone days, even visiting friends with no contact.
Kylie's family reported her missing here at Gosford Police Station on the 8th of May. Right from the start, police were interested in Paul Wilkinson. 3 days later, they asked him to come in for an interview, but he didn't turn up. It soon became apparent that getting the truth out of Wilkinson, in fact getting anything at all, would be a long and tortuous business.
Do you think of anywhere she might have gone? I don't know.
Police suspected Wilkinson because they now had the records of the thousands of text messages and phone calls he and Kylie had exchanged. But for the next 3 years, he consistently denied having an affair with her.
Did you ever reply to her SMSs?
I did.
What, did you ring her up or you send her SMS?
I didn't bring all that often. All up, I'd say about no more than 3 times. I made contact.
He was a good liar, an experienced liar.
It was an experienced liar, yes. I wouldn't say he was a good one, but he was an experienced one. It would appear that way, yeah.
I know I've wasted your time in the past and I'm beyond it now.
But the lies just got bigger and more outlandish. In the days after Kylie disappeared, there was a mysterious fire at Paul Wilkinson's home. He claimed it was started by Kylie, who wanted revenge after he rejected her sexual advances.
Can you just tell us a little bit more about the threats, what sort of threats she was making towards you?
So there was going to be harm to myself, harm to my little boy, and harm to Julie. She actually said that my little boy and Julie would be killed.
What sort of lies did you have to try and work through?
Oh, what type of lies didn't we have to work through? That Kylie was involved in a drug syndicate, that Kylie was standing over him.
If you don't kill her, I will.
Wow, I can't remember the lies, there's so many.
When were you aware of this other woman, Kylie?
Not fully aware until detectives interviewed me, and they told me that he'd been having an affair and the amount of SMSs and the pregnancy.
What was it like getting that?
Oh, that was a bombshell. Yep. Very much so.
But despite that bombshell, Julie Wilkinson stood by her husband for months.
It is now 2 minutes past 3. Interview's concluded.
He taunted Kylie's family and detectives with endless false leads about her fate and where he'd hidden her body.
Before we came down here with Paul James Wilkinson, he said he couldn't be sure, but it's somewhere located within this area.
At one stage, Wilkinson even tried to frame another policeman with Kylie's murder.
The statement is true to the best of my knowledge.
And he did try to implicate another policeman?
He did, yes.
And the pressure you've got is you're pretty convinced there's been a murder,
yes.
But you don't have a body?
No.
Don't have a witness?
No.
No crime scene?
No.
What are the odds of success in a case like that?
We had no forensic evidence either.
But their luck was about to change. Julie Wilkinson eventually saw through her husband's lies and decided to help police.
When did you start to think that your husband could have killed Kylie?
I don't remember exactly when it was, but all the stories that didn't add up and didn't match and kept changing.
How did that make you feel?
It was the fear of my son's father's done this. That's hard. Now I'm gonna cry.
We can stop for a sec. This is really...
Normally it doesn't get to me.
This is the moment for you where you had to make a decision for you and your son?
Mm.
And you wanted to do something where you could both be safe?
Yep.
And soon there was another dramatic breakthrough. Paul Wilkinson sent Julie this incriminating text.
Everyone has a reason for hiding a crime. Call me nasty. Call me cruel. Her family can live their lives in misery for all I care. Fuck them. Weapon they can have. Her, no.
How crucial was that text?
It indicated that he knew the weapon, where it was and what was used, and where the body was.
But that wasn't enough on its own?
No, far from it.
But what did finally crack the case was not one of Paul's texts, rather the text Kylie had so excitedly sent to him just before she disappeared.
Today, and then Wednesday, and then it's Dubbo. You and I together forever.
For the purposes of the interview, Paul, could you please state your full name and spell your surname?
There was now no way of denying the affair. Wilkinson was charged with Kylie Labouchardier's murder.
I lost my temper and I just went straight for the throat.
He finally confessed, but even then he claimed he only killed her because she was threatening his family.
So you've lost your temper, you've grabbed her around the throat.
And before I knew it, she was limp.
I know it sounds like a silly question, but what was Kylie doing at the time? Was she obviously trying to scream or trying to free herself?
There was a bit of a struggle.
You've dug the hole, you've then put Kylie in the hole.
Yes.
And then you put the dirt back on top.
Yes.
And What did you do with the shovel?
I took it and I threw it in the river.
But true to form, Wilkinson's cruel games continued as police tried unsuccessfully to find Kylie's body.
We're currently on Cruel Road at Mooney Mooney, directly beneath the Mooney Mooney Bridge.
This is Mooney Mooney, north of Sydney, and it's here that Paul Wilkinson led police on a wild goose chase. He claimed that this is where Kylie Labouchardier's body was buried. Now, because of his police background, Wilkinson knew that they would have to take his claims seriously, that they would have to follow up each and every lead. But Wilkinson was playing a cruel game, one that raised and then dashed the hopes of Kylie's family. And he did it time and time again.
After each search, it was just gut-wrenching. And that's, as an investigator, you can only imagine what it would have been like for the family.
The frustration must have been enormous.
It was, I was on an emotional roller coaster. There was just days and days, uncontrollable sobbing. I suffered a massive breakdown with the searches. I slept with the mobile phone to my ear.
How would you describe what he was doing with these false searches?
Very cruel. Very, very cruel.
But while police never found Kylie's body, her family did get their day in court, and it was the first time they'd ever come face to face with her killer.
What did you think of Wilkinson? When you first saw him in court, what did you think of what you saw?
I don't even know how I can answer that, Brett. A mongrel that murdered my daughter.
It had taken 5 years, but on the 22nd of May 2009, Paul Wilkinson was sentenced to a minimum of 24 years in prison for Kylie Labouchardier's murder.
That was a feeling of absolute jubilation that we had won it for her. Yeah, jubilation. The whole family just could not believe it. Couldn't believe it.
Coming up, behind bars and still pulling the strings.
We haven't found her. He knows what he did that night and he knows where she is.
I fucked around with you for a while. I apologise for that.
Paul Wilkinson was finally behind bars. He played a cruel 5-year game of cat and mouse with police and Kylie Labouchardier's grief-stricken family.
The life sentence of grief he has given to my family.
I was numb, relieved. It was very, very emotional for all of us. Very emotional at the time. Finally, it was over. We had got a result.
There's one thing that's not quite over, though.
No, that's correct. We haven't found her. He holds the golden key, Brett. He knows what he did that night, and he knows where she is. And I'm hoping, within hope, that one day that he will let us know, and that we will find her.
For Paul Wilkinson's wife, Julie, it's been an incredibly traumatic experience too. Finding out her husband was having an affair and a child with another woman, and discovering he was a killer.
Look, don't sit and think for 1 second Julie's entirely innocent. She's lied to you for her teeth.
But perhaps cruelest of all was the fact Wilkinson had tried to implicate her in Kylie's murder.
She was aware of the murder.
Murder?
Yeah, she's well aware of it.
What's Paul done to you?
He ruined my life for several years. Both him and Kylie took away my ability to enjoy parenthood for the first time. He's a narcissist, and I don't know, he's evil. Yeah. He's not insane, he's very cunning, but evil, yeah.
And even in prison, Paul Wilkinson is still pulling the strings, manipulating those left behind. So to this day, we still don't know where Kylie was buried?
No.
And what does that mean for the family?
Yeah, can't even imagine. It's got to be horrendous.
I'd like to have closure. I'd like to know that I can give her the funeral that she deserves, to be able to talk to her. I talk to her every day. I see this shining star in the sky, and that reminds me of Kylie.
And you feel Kylie's looking over you?
Oh, definitely. She's my guardian angel.
She's still being Smiley Kylie?
Oh, definitely. And she'll always be Smiley Kylie to me.
In Melbourne, it's 14 years since pretty, bubbly Rachel Barber
Hello, Rachel.
was murdered by the obsessive and deeply troubled Caroline Reed Robertson. Caroline was so desperately unhappy with her own life, she was consumed by wild fantasies about her neighbour. But she didn't just want to be like Rachel Barber, she wanted to become Rachel Barber.
I mean, who would have thought that a 19-year-old girl in the first place would have murdered a 15-year-old girl? She didn't have to murder Rachel to change her life.
Well, this is clearly an extreme case. I mean, you can see a bit of fantasising in most teenagers, but to see someone going out of their way to kill their victim to replace them, that's really unique.
It's not possible to know just how much Caroline's chaotic and dysfunctional family life led to her state of mind. Certainly, Caroline's parents didn't act on the warning signs. Do you feel Caroline's parents have some responsibility? They have some responsibility.
I do, and I feel quite strongly about that.
So they should have acted sooner?
They should have acted sooner.
Caroline Reed Robertson served 14 and a half years in jail. The last stretch was here. And by all accounts, she was a model prisoner. And now, she's out on parole. She's all but free. And Rachel's family is fearful that despite her good behaviour, Caroline is the same person that went into jail all those years ago.
Generally, people who are ruthless, who've particularly, killed one or more individuals for personal gratification, there's not a lot of research that shows that these people can grow a conscience.
Would not surprise me in the least. She targets me or my sister. But me, I'm just like, you want to see what I look like? Go for it. I mean, I'm not scared of you. Why should I have to stop my life and hide away because you're a crazy bit.
She took the joy of life from Rachel. And I remember a few weeks before Rachel was murdered, Rachel came running into the back of the shop where I used to work, full of life. And I thought to myself, whatever would I do if ever I lost you? I wouldn't be able to cope. And I've always remembered that.